This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future. Processing of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources.
Dumelang, good afternoon and welcome to Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408 and Parliament YouTube channel, coming to you live from Parliament TV studios on the precinct. And of course, remember to join the conversation on all our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA and let us know what you think about the budget vote that is going to go on today at 2 p.m. right here on Parliament TV channel DSTV 408. Libitsa la ka ke Tshepo Mori, ha ke tsamaye ke le mong. I'm with my co-presenter Shihlamariso Ngoveni. Good afternoon, Shihla.
Inkomo Tshepo, I'm like a Parliament TV Vitoramina Emina Shihlamariso Ngoveni. Indeed, today all eyes are on Parliament as both houses, the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, debate Parliament's budget vote. These important deliberations will be led by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Thoko Didiza, and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Manana Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane. This debate is a critical moment in the parliamentary calendar where the institution accounts for its budget priorities and strategic focus for the year ahead.
So please stay with us as we have prepared for you a very insightful lineup about the work of Parliament. Now, Parliament's budget vote seeks to outline how funds are allocated to support its core constitutional functions. Now, these are oversight, lawmaking, public involvement, and international engagement. It also provides an account of the previous financial year's expenditure, ensuring transparency, accountability in the use of public funds. Now, this afternoon, to put Parliament's budget vote into context, we're looking at some of the key issues shaping South Africa's national development agenda, including the effectiveness of parliamentary oversight in driving improved service delivery, progress in public participation and citizen engagement in the legislative processes, strategic priorities in lawmaking to address socio-economic challenges, and finally, Parliament's role in strengthening South Africa's position in international forums.
And as we prepare for this afternoon's budget vote, it's important to remember that it takes place during the same week as Mandela Day, a time when we honor the life and legacy of Tatana Nelson Mandela. Mandela Day, observed every year on 18 July, is just around the corner. This year's theme, "It's in your hands," reminds all of us that building a better South Africa is a shared responsibility, one that touches every part of our lives, including right here in Parliament.
And throughout the month, South Africans reflect on Madiba's values of service, leadership and accountability, and are encouraged to take action, whether by volunteering 67 minutes, supporting their communities, or simply doing something positive that lifts others. And in many ways, that spirit of service is what today's debate is all about. How Parliament plans to use its budget to serve the people, oversee government, and make laws that improve lives, your lives as a South African citizen. Now, how will you be honoring Mandela Day?
Interesting question indeed. Some argue it's just 67 minutes, but I think it's just a reminder. The 67 minutes are just a reminder that we can contribute to society in different ways. I think it's a very interesting question.
Active citizenship, I think, is the most outlines everything when it comes to Madiba Day.
Yeah, definitely. And Parliament will also be going big this Mandela Day. I saw preparations underway outside, preparing for the day on Friday. I think there are some activities, interesting activities going on in Parliament as well. Where will you be spending your 67 minutes?
So you're putting me on the spot here. This is me being a good public servant, letting all South Africans know that watch Parliament TV, your window to democracy, that this is what the work of Parliament is, and that you can be involved by being an active citizen, not only just with the work of Parliament, but within your communities, and serve your 67 minutes on Madiba Day, doing something good and making something worth living for, even if it's just for 67 minutes. And if you're just joining us, you're still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408, and we are discussing Parliament budget vote, which will be debated from both houses, and that is the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 p.m. Now stay tuned, as we'll be bringing you these debates live on all Parliament forums.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Thoko Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
When the Sergeant-at-Arms enters the chamber, followed by the Speaker of the National Assembly, it signifies that the House is in session and the proceedings are official. The mace is a symbol of authority of the Speaker of the National Assembly. It was designed to reflect the culture, the tradition, diversity, and different languages of South Africa. At the top of the mace is a drum. It is an 18-carat drum. On top of it, it's a piece of a springbok skin attached to the drum using 18 stones. These stones were made from South African minerals and gemstones. The drum symbolizes, or the drum in this case represents, a tradition where drums were used in Africa to call people to gather and speak. And to us, it is a reminder that South Africa's successful transition to democracy was achieved through dialogue. People had to come together and speak. But if you look at the drum, just right on top of it, it's a gold book. Now this book represents the Constitution of South Africa. But it is important for Parliament because the Constitution represents the principles around which Parliament seeks to conduct its business. If you look at the drum, it is ordinary people of South Africa. There is a scientist, there is a soccer player, there is a tractor, someone working on a tractor. There are many people of South Africa, ordinary people of South Africa. This simply says Parliament has, since the dawn of democracy, sought to make this institution a place where voices can be heard. Ordinary people of South Africa have found their voice through the establishment of a democratic South Africa.
But the priorities that the various parties, after consultation, came up with in terms of the 7th administration that will support our strategic plan are 4, which is about strengthening our oversight, looking at ways in which we can enhance mechanisms to monitor government responsiveness, improve data utilization, and implement accountability frameworks. Some of those issues have already been highlighted in a number of discussions, as well as issues that have been deliberated among both houses on how we support committees to actually do their oversight work. The other issues related on strengthening oversight, how we put mechanisms to actually follow up on the House resolutions that relate to what the executive has to do and see to what extent there is responsiveness on those. So we will deal with those in detail in terms of what are the expected outcomes on all of these issues. The second priority that was agreed upon was enhancing our legislative processes and public involvement. Chairperson, you will be aware, and members, that one of the issues that have come up even in this administration, that have come out in the courts, but also some of the matters that have been taken up by other parties, asking to what extent had been public involvement in the development of particular legislation. One of those legislation, honorable members, you would know, that related to the Traditional Leadership and Khoisan Act, which actually the courts turned back to say we needed to do more in terms of public engagement in respect of that legislation. But there are others that, as we know, are in court, such as the Expropriation Act. Again, challenges in court are about the extent of consultation at provincial level to seek the mandates and so on. I'm raising these issues because I think as the seventh administration, we really need to look at how our public involvement is strengthened, not only in lawmaking, but also on policy and oversight as Parliament. The other issue that related to enhancing our legislative process was the issue that members, even during the orientation, raised: the time it takes for legislation to pass, which as an institution we will have to also work to review, such that we do not have legislating that take longer and longer in the process, and by the time the legislation maybe gets passed already, the issue that it sought to address might be irrelevant at that time. The other issue that was a priority identified for this administration during those consultations was improving public appointment processes. You know that there has been some concerns raised about how various appointments are made for people to serve in public institutions, particularly such as Chapter 9 institutions and others. So this is another issue that there was a view from the consultation that we need to improve that appointment process so that it's also transparent and that everybody gets comfort on how such appointments have been made. The last issue was improving international engagements, and not only just in participating in multilateral fora, but also to what extent, as Parliament, examine the treaties that our countries enters into, how those are ratified, how much time does Parliament have to actually engage on those issues to see whether the national interest has actually been covered.
And that was the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mama Thoko Didiza, during a strategic planning session of the 7th Parliament. Of course, you're still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408, coming to you live here at Parliament TV studios at the heart of the precinct. Now, if you're just joining us, we're discussing Parliament budget vote, which will be debated from both houses, the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, at 2 p.m. Now, the Constitution of South Africa mandates Parliament to scrutinize and oversee the actions of the executive, make sure that laws are followed and the Constitution is respected, all to help improve service delivery and make life better for everyone who lives in South Africa. Now, today, the spotlight is on Parliament itself as it tables its own debate and to debate its own budget for the year ahead. This budget, known as Budget Vote 2, sets out how Parliament will carry out its mandate to serve the people effectively through stronger oversight, better laws, and deeper public engagement. Now, this process leads us to the budget vote debate which is an important moment, when Parliament reviews and discusses the funding and priorities of each government department and institutions. Now, it's called a debate because members of Parliament from different political parties will engage, interrogate, and reflect on whether those funds are being allocated in a way that truly meets the needs of the country. Now, this debate comes as a pivotal time as the 7th Parliament begins its work. The focus now is on strengthening oversight mechanisms, enhancing lawmaking processes, and public involvement, improving public office appointments, and international engagement. And of course, you're still watching Parliament TV here, and we'll be bringing you that debate of both the National Assembly and the NCOP, where this budget vote of Parliament will be put to the members of Parliament, and it will be discussed, it will be engaged, and of course, it is for you, the person who is sitting at home. Stay watching and stay informed. Join the conversation by saying what you need to say and what you think of the work of Parliament and whether the money is being used accordingly at Parliament of RSA across all social media platforms. You're still watching Parliament TV. Stay tuned.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtwenitsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policymaking, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, Harnessing Parliamentary Diplomacy for the Realization of Global Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Welcome back. You are watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408.
coming to you live from Parliament TV studios in the precincts of Parliament down here in Cape Town. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA. Let us know what you think here on Parliament TV. If you are just joining us, we are discussing Parliament budget vote, which will be debated from both houses of Parliament today, the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 p.m. We've just listened earlier on to the Speaker of the National Assembly outlining the priorities agreed upon by political parties at the strategic session held earlier in the year. While the National Assembly is responsible for electing the President, passing laws, ensuring that members of the executive perform their work properly, and providing a forum where representatives of the people can debate issues. The National Council of Provinces, on the other hand, is responsible or is constitutionally mandated to represent the interests of South Africans, the provinces, all the 9 provinces, in the national legislative processes. It ensures that provincial concerns are considered in the making of national laws, particularly those affecting the provinces. The NCOP participates in lawmaking, oversees government actions, promotes cooperative governance, and facilitates public involvement in its proceedings. It plays a very important role in strengthening the link between provincial and national spheres of government, ensuring inclusive and accountable decision-making. Let's listen now to what Ms. Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane, the chairperson of the NCOP, has to say.
Freedom. Honorable members, the NCOP, as the second chamber of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, is constitutionally mandated to ensure that provincial interests are taken into account in the national sphere of government. Since its inception, the NCOP has always played an important role in the promotion of the principles of cooperative governance and intergovernmental relations. To this end, the critical intergovernmental relations mandate of the NCOP ensures that the 3 spheres of government work together cooperatively in performing their unique constitutional functions. This mandate compels the NCOP to deepen synergy across the 3 spheres of government on matters of concurrent competence. Honorable members, the important flagship programs that have repositioned the NCOP as a formidable second chamber in the execution of the electoral mandate of the 6th dispensation include the following: Taking Parliament to the People program, the Provincial Week program, as well as the Local Government Week program. These strategic programs have over the years become institutionalized public participation and oversight programs, which will continue to improve on as part of the evolutionary path of the NCOP's work. Under the Sector Parliaments program, the NCOP has also made great strides in institutionalizing key oversight and report back programs. Some of the key Sector Parliaments programs driven by the NCOP includes the Women's Parliament, Youth Parliament, Men's Parliament, as well as the Provincial Women's Charter Report Back program. Additionally, the NCOP has institutionalized the 3-sphere planning sessions, whose primary objective is to address planning and coordination disjunctures across the 3 spheres of government.
And you're still watching Parliament TV, and that was the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mama Refilwe Mtsweni-Tsipane, at the 7th Parliament Strategic Planning Session. Now, of course, we're still talking about the budget that is to be introduced in the Assembly today, as well as the NCOPs. And of course, this means having you to understand the budget instruments. Now, of course, the national budget is governed by the money bill Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act 2009. Now, it outlines the legal framework and process through which Parliament processes the budget-related instruments. The main instruments that make up the national budget include the Fiscal Framework and Revenue Proposal, which sets out government's macroeconomic and fiscal policy, including revenue targets, economic assumptions, debt levels, and overall expenditure ceilings. It provides the foundation upon which the rest of the budget is built. The fiscal framework must be adopted within 16 days after the tabling of the national budget. Now, with the Division of Revenue Bill, which determines how available funds are distributed among the three spheres of government, national, provincial, and local, it is a Section 76 bill, meaning it must be considered by both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. The Division of Revenue Bill must be passed within 35 days of the fiscal framework's adoption.
And the Appropriation Bill, which allocates specific amounts of money to government departments, entities, and programs for the financial year. It is a process, or it's rather processed as a Section 77 bill, which only requires passage by the National Assembly. The appropriation bill must be passed within 4 months after the start of the financial year. These instruments are considered sequentially by Parliament, and each must be passed before proceeding to the next stage. And very shortly, my colleague Tsepo will be talking to the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Lotriet, who will unpack what we may expect today.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtweni-Tsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions.
Welcome back to Parliament's TV channel 408, coming to you live from Parliament, the custodian of your democracy. And we are building up to the debate on Parliament budget vote in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 p.m. Now remember to also tune in to our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA to follow these proceedings. Now we are now joined by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Anneli Lotriet, who plays a central role in shaping how Parliament functions, from driving its digital transformation and ICT policy to strengthening the capacity of members through training and development. Now, she also oversees Parliament's e-strategy, ensures the welfare and benefits of public representatives, that it's managed responsibly, and she chairs the ParMed Board of Trustees. DS, thank you so much for joining us again on Parliament TV.
Good afternoon, and it's wonderful to be here again.
Thank you. Now, DS, let's get right into it. What role do you play in the processing of Parliament's budget?
I think when we look at the budget and Parliament specifically, it is a function that resides mostly with the executive authority. That would be the Speaker and the Chairperson of the NCOP in collaboration with the Secretary to Parliament. So where myself and the Deputy Chair of the NCOP play a role is more in terms of the specific functions that we have, the responsibilities that we have, and the things that we would like to do. So not a direct role in terms of this is the budget, this is the expenditure, etc. But I think our role is to make known the needs, specifically what you referred to in the introduction, the specific needs for the members of Parliament.
And with that, then, you oversee training and capacity building for members. With the budget vote now approaching, it's just at 2 p.m., how has this investment improved MPs' ability to perform their oversight and legislative roles effectively?
I'm very glad you asked that, because that's also in my speech this afternoon.
Okay.
Where I refer to the capacity building, which is critical, you know, because members come to Parliament, but that doesn't mean that they are, or they have the full capacity to fulfill these functions. So we've had our first training sessions. We've had very good feedback, so I'm very excited about that. So yes, training is on track, we're going there, and we, very importantly, we also had a survey to find out from members prior to the training what their needs are, and then post-training to find out, well, did we hit the mark? And I'm very pleased to say, yes, we did apparently, and that we also have wonderful comments what to build on for future capacity building.
Now, with that, then, of course, we did say that public participation is a constitutional pillar, especially within the context of South Africans, and that many South Africans still feel disconnected from the work of Parliament. I always say that people think it's some building there somewhere, and they cannot really get in touch and engage with the representatives that they've put in these seats. Now, with that, DS, what role then can digital tools and constituency work play in bridging that gap between South Africans and the representatives within Parliament?
I think that's one of our main challenges, because the system that we do have is not a constitutionally elected representation. So you don't have your MP from your constituency. We are assigned constituency. So it makes it much more difficult to give access to the citizens of this country. And I think digital development can play a role there, specifically also the TV channel that we are on now. That is very important. And I think that we could maybe look at different ways to also enhance that, social media. And that's all part of the digital platforms that we have to really take seriously. And it's not just a nice add-on. This is critical for people to voice their opinions and for MPs to actually know what the people think.
And with that, then, we know that Parliament is in the process of creating artificial intelligence capability. How far is the process as the world is moving towards this and in that direction to ensure that there's better, efficient use of resources?
You know, when we talk about technology, artificial intelligence, it is challenging and scary at the same time. It's very exciting, but we also have to be very cognizant of the threats it does have.
Yeah.
But in terms of Parliament, we're very much aware and alive to the whole new world of technology out there. So I am the chairperson, co-chair of the ICT forum, where we look specifically at that and AI. How do we deal with that? How do we incorporate it into our everyday work in Parliament? Now, besides members assisting them and also pointing out the dangers of AI, that, you know, even though it's a wonderful tool,
Yes.
it still needs to be managed. We're also looking at enhancing the functionalities such as translation services, etc., within the AI world.
Now, with that then, DS, of course, you talked about threats, right? Is there anything then that Parliament is doing to ensure that issues such as cybersecurity are combated?
Yes. In terms of cybersecurity, there is a bill. So we have to also make sure that that is now put into practice,
Yeah.
not only in terms of cybersecurity in the country, but also in Parliament. You know, we sit with a lot of important information that we have to protect. We sit with members' information that
Yeah.
we have to protect. We also have to educate and train our members how to use it and not to fall for all the different kinds of challenges that this world presents these days.
Now, DS, as the leader of Parliament's e-strategy, shaping ICT policy, how important is it for Parliament to continue investing in digital technology, not just to modernize its own operations, but to strengthen the functions such as oversight, accountability, and public participation?
I don't think we'll be able to fulfill those functions in a new world without technology. So I think it should be front and center
Yes.
of how we approach everything in Parliament, how we do our oversight. You know, the wonderful thing about this is big data, where we can in fact access so many pieces of information, and with AI you can order it, structure it, and also make it more accessible to members as well as the public. So that there are such exciting opportunities waiting for us. We now just have to get to the point where we can put these things into place. But that will also have to be part of budgets and future budget planning.
Yes. Now let's focus on P20. Can you just briefly explain to our viewers what P20 is about and what it is?
Right, the P20, the P stands for Parliament, and the 20 refers to the fact that it is linked to the G20, which is later in the year, in November. The P20 is where the speakers and deputy speakers, in some countries they call them the presidents of their assemblies, come together, the G20 countries, the speakers come together, and we discuss things of an important nature for parliaments. And one of the critical things is always, you know, you have the G20 where the leaders of government, the heads of state do take certain decisions, make agreements, but how do you make that effective in Parliament? Because we are responsible for the actual legislation and the oversight of that whole process. So that is what we will be discussing.
Alrighty. And now with that, of course, on the back of that, with this afternoon's budget vote debate, what significance then is that the fact that South Africa is hosting the P20?
Well, I think it is significant in the fact that it's the first time on African soil that it will be held, and that we will be directing much of our attention and time to the P20. So we have a budget because we still have to continue with all the other work that we as parliamentarians have to do, but the P20 gives us a new impetus and focuses us on how important parliaments should be, and therefore our budgets should also talk to the importance of parliaments.
Now, lastly, DS, why should the public tune in and listen to the budget votes today? I mean, earlier we spoke about how people feel disconnected from Parliament. There's some people that feel like, you know what, I want nothing to do with politics. It's whatever, you know, as long as it doesn't affect me. I think they don't realize how much it really affects them. So in that, Why is it important for South Africans, for people that live in South Africa, to tune in to the budget vote today?
The short answer is it's your money. It's the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
So if you want to know how it is spent, you have to listen to the budgets. So that's the short answer. But I think it is important for citizens, the public, to be aware, to be involved. And you say that people aren't interested in politics. Well, politics is interested in you. Everything that happens in this country is politics.
Yeah.
So I think this is really the one opportunity you have to see what it is, what the budget debates are, what the budget is, and how is it spent. Because then you can hold us accountable in the next election.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker, for making the time.
My pleasure.
So, as the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly has said, it is your money, therefore it is within your interest to watch the budget vote today. And of course, she was sharing her views on Parliament's priorities and the road ahead. And that is Dr. Annelie Lotriet, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. And if you've just joined us, welcome. You're watching Parliament TV channel 408, coming to you live from Parliament, as we're building up to the debate of Parliament budget debate in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 p.m. Now remember to also tune in on all our social media platforms and follow these proceedings. It is your money. Stay tuned.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtweni-Tsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future. South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policy making, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, Harnessing Parliamentary Diplomacy for the Realization of Global Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, Government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources.
Welcome back to Parliament TV, channel 408, coming to you live from Parliament as we are building up to the debate on Parliament budget vote in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 this afternoon. Remember to also tune into our social media platforms to follow these proceedings. They will be live on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, and all our platforms. Now, the budget process in Parliament is quite an intense one, and it follows a series of structured stages that involve both the executive and Parliament. Stage 1 of that process is about drafting and planning. The process begins within the executive branch, which is government, where the National Treasury issues medium-term expenditure guidelines to all government departments, which then draft their budget proposals, and Parliament begins its engagement during this stage by reviewing previous spending through the budgetary review and recommendations reports, which are called the BRRRs, and they are compiled by committees. These reports help inform future budget decisions. And then stage 2 of that process, which is the legislative and public process, it comes once the Minister of Finance tables the budget in Parliament, which usually happens immediately after the budget, the State of the Nation address. Then Parliament begins its oversight process, where committees interrogate departmental allocations, review macroeconomic assumptions, and hold public consultations. This stage is essential to ensure transparency and input from various sectors of society. And then it moves on to stage 3.
And of course, stage 3 is the approval and voting. And this is where Parliament considers and votes on the budget instruments in a specific legal sequence. Now, the first, we have fiscal framework and revenue proposals. Secondly, we have division of revenue bill. And thirdly, we have the appropriation bill. Now, each of these requirements specific majorities and voting thresholds to be adopted. Now, stage 4 is the implementation and oversight. Now, once approved, the executive is authorized to implement the budget. Government departments and public entities begin their spending according to the approved allocations, and Parliament, through its oversight committees, monitors spending, and assesses performance. Now, the Auditor General audits the financial performance of departments to ensure accountability. And with that, of course, you have to make sure that you will watch the budget vote that will be taking place at 2 p.m. for the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Stay tuned. You're watching Parliament TV.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtshweni-Tsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policymaking, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, Harnessing Parliamentary Diplomacy for the Realization of Global Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Itlhela ime amukela nakambe eka Parliament TV channel 408, coming to you live from Parliament as we are building up to the debate on Parliament budget vote in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 p.m. Remember to also tune in to our social media platforms to follow these proceedings, and they will be shown on our YouTube channel, Parliament TV, and all other platforms. We've just had from the presiding officers of the House, Dr. Annelie Lotriet, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Now we turn our focus to the administrative side of this institution, the office that keeps Parliament functioning daily and ensures its work is properly supported, including Parliament TV. Parliament is comprised of two main components, the political and administrative arms. The political arm is led by the Executive Authority, which consists of the Speaker of the National Assembly and Deputy, and the Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. This authority provides strategic direction and leadership in line with Parliament's constitutional mandate. The administrative arm is headed by the Secretary to Parliament, who reports directly to the Executive Authority. The STP is the accounting officer
and is responsible for overseeing the effective management of Parliament's operations, resources, and performance. The administrative arm provides essential institutional support to the political leadership, ensuring that both houses of Parliament are able to carry out their core functions, which are lawmaking, oversight, public participation, and international engagement efficiently, effectively, and with full accountability for public funds. Joining us now is the STP, Mr. Kolile George, who is the Secretary to Parliament. STP, Parliament has outlined 4 key priorities for the 7th Parliament, which are strengthening oversight, enhancing lawmaking and public involvement, improvement of appointments to public office, and advancing international engagement. These priorities set the tone for how Parliament plans to serve the public in the years ahead. And as Parliament tables its budget vote today, this afternoon, how are these priorities reflected in the functioning and programs being proposed, and what should South Africans expect in terms of tangible impact on service delivery? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Shia. Good afternoon to all the Parliament TV viewers. Indeed, today it's the penultimate stage on the governance approval processes, in that vote 2 will now be presented in both houses simultaneously. Yeah. And that is a statement of resourcing the political priorities that have been outlined over an extensive period of 10 months. As we transitioned to the 7th Parliament in July last year, we started in earnest to ensure that we set in motion a blueprint for Parliament in both houses to start a consultative process. So the Executive Authority of Parliament oversaw that process. And as required by law, the accounting officer should start the process immediately to make sure that within the 6 months after the start of a new administrative term, there's a clearly outlined process. So that process was done quite extensively in both houses, and we're quite excited that, as led by house chairs of both houses, the participation of committees was outstanding, dedicating no less than 4 hours in a day to go through that, to spell out what are each house's respective priorities and how do they evaluate the 6th Parliament and set a tone for the 7th Parliament. So the presentation of the budget statement speaks to that, to say how do we then resource those priorities in such a way that in a context of tension between the desires as outlined in the priorities versus the reality of budget constraints, how do we present that? So both the Speaker and the Chair will be presenting that today in each of the House at 2 o'clock, a budget of no less than 5.8 billion rand, to be able to 5.87 billion rather, to be able to outline how we will implement the priorities in the operations, how we will drive the rebuilding of Parliament. And those operations, of course, speak to the 4 priorities that we have outlined: deepening international relations, driving accountability, and ensuring that there's a streamlined process of appointing public office bearers and also disappointing them in such a way that those laws that govern and define the respective approaches for each of the chapter 9, 10, and 11, there's a much more streamlined process, and also driving oversight and public participation as the 7th Parliament.
Talking of driving oversight, there's an expectation on Parliament in that aspect, considering the events of the past 2 weeks. And Parliament has already committed or mandated 3 committees to follow up on the issues that are happening at that level. What are we likely to see in terms of the budget for oversight purposes?
The budget for oversight purposes, each committee, at least as a departure point, has been given an amount to start its own priorities, which before we could not allocate. So we now have, at least as a base minimum, 3 million rand for each of the portfolio committees and select committees, and a pooled funding to be able to say from a joint fund, each of the committees will be able to tap into, depending on what is planned out to be executed for those committees. So with the 3 committees set up, they will be able to move in earnest to start framing what will be the focus areas, as the Speaker has clearly outlined that this must be done within 14 days with recommendation on any matter that the committee deems appropriate to be able to bring before the House.
SCP, you recently appeared before the Joint Standing Committee on the Financial Management of Parliament, where you briefed the committee about Parliament's plans. I'd like us to take a look at that clip if it's ready. I'm told it's not ready yet. But you've touched on the budget set aside for oversight. You've also touched on the on international engagements. We are hosting the P20 later this year. What can we expect in terms of what Parliament has set aside for that purpose?
There's an allocation for P20, given that it is a premier responsibilities for South Africa in terms of G20. So likewise, us as a legislative arm of the state will be hosting all the speakers of the 20 member countries in terms of those parliaments who are part of the countries who are members of G20. So it's quite an exciting period for Parliament, because once more it demonstrates the capability and the standing and stature of our Parliament to indicate that it stands shoulder high and tall amongst the community of nations as part of our international policy as a country, that of deepening relations, at the same time coexisting peacefully with other countries. So in the context of Parliament, whatever commitments that are outlined in the G20 policy priorities of the executive, it would likewise translate into what Parliament needs to do to set out the legal instruments, if any, to begin to undergird those priorities, simultaneously to play a leading role in terms of looking at international agreements that needs to be ratified in each of the countries, depending on the context of issues. But it will be largely more about expressive conversations by Parliament as voices of the people on what is the meaning of solidarity. When we talk about economic inclusion and solidarity, how does it translate in all the facets of the different dimensions of economy, social, political, environmental, and make sure that across all the engagements, the notions of sustainability undergird the various priority settings in the context where resources are limited, but we could be able to make sure that economic diplomacy is deepened by each country, either at a bilateral level, but also reassert the centrality of international relations, that what brings countries together is a commitment to peaceful coexistence, is a commitment to solidarity, but also a commitment to a rules-based economic template that governs how we must ensure there's predictability in what each country does in relation to each other.
Yeah, talking about limited resources, in your recent briefing to the Joint Standing Committee on the Financial Management of Parliament, you flagged a funding shortfall. I think it was to the tune of 521 million rand this year and over 1.1 billion, I think, in recent years. This has a real impact on Parliament's core functions, like oversight that you've touched on and public participation. What does this mean for Parliament's ability to deliver on its mandate? How do we go around the shortfall?
It's quite a tricky issue. It's one thing to have a shortfall that you realize that within a space of 12 months you'll be able to recover. But in the context of Parliament, it has been a cumulative decline in the allocations to Parliament. As we speak now, it is no less than 1.2 billion over a 6-year period. So we may be facing further negative headwinds even in subsequent years. So in the context of championing a 5-year strategy with dwindling resource base, you are left with a declining scope for reprioritizations. You could reprioritize up to a certain level. And once it starts showing that your cash flows continue to weaken, and it forces you to make trade-offs that otherwise will begin to undermine your very constitutional obligation to discharge your mandates of lawmaking, public participation, and oversight. So what we are doing now, as we presented, Parliament is developing a funding model to be able to bring forward a compelling case in terms of how Parliament's mandate ought to be funded. So when we say the National Assembly has got 18 bills in Q1 to contend with, and NCOP is sitting with 10 bills, what does it take to champion one bill? Championing meaning to drive a full-scale public participation in the full cycle of informing citizens, advising them, involving them, ensuring that they partake in the inputting process and feedback. So what does it take for one bill? If we're championing a farm dwellers protection bill or a national health insurance scheme, how many provinces are in South Africa? We have 9 provinces. How many municipalities do we have in South Africa? 257. How many districts? 44. So if you have to go to Limpopo and say 5 districts, you can't say you are going to go to Capricorn only and say you have consulted because it's chosen by convenience, perhaps because of resources. You say, let's meet in Polokwane.
No.
But Limpopo has got Vembe district, has got many other districts that are existing in that area. How do you make sure that you have done what the constitutional injunction dictates to Parliament? Ensure meaningful and adequate participation. So what would be meaningful in a context where resource dictates how you must consult? You go to KZN, it has got 10 regions, 10 districts rather. So if you only do a norm of only 3, it doesn't pass constitutional muster, and most of our bills are rejected on the basis of that, even though they've already been assented by the president. If somebody takes us to court, most of the time we are vulnerable precisely because of the inadequacy of public participation. So the 521 must be understood in that context, that it carries a corrosive effect to even weaken our ability to discharge even one foundational part of our mandate. So we currently have allocated budgets. We highlighted the 521. We think the funding model must help us to have a much more compelling proposition for the national fiscus to allocate adequate resources to Parliament.
Is there any alternative source that can be consulted to fund Parliament, an alternative funding model outside the current allocation from the national fiscus?
I'm not sure if there are alternatives, in the sense that Parliament being the premier site of governance and accountability in the country, most of the time, if you look at other sources, is either to say, can private players contribute? Chances are it might not be desirable for an institution like us that there's private players who could say, well, we just want to donate. But sometimes donation carries concomitant obligations that may be expressly said or unsaid. If those donors then bring forward to Parliament and say, there's now a tobacco amendment bill, and they would probably remind you that it looks like it might affect us, or a sugar industry amendment bill that could affect major players, how do you then deal with that, or health? So from a private contribution point of view, or a donor, yes, it might come as a donor, but somehow it might carry that. If it were to about accessing Parliament, let's say from downstream revenues like touring Parliament by outside people, they would pay a nominal fee of 5 rand, because Parliament also has a duty to promote national cohesion, social cohesion and belonging. So you can't say you're going to pencil it in such a way that it must be modeled around commercial models of transactions. So in that context, I'm saying they are very limited. Donors in terms of internal community is already declining, because most of them are saying South Africa is no longer in the early stages where it justified a windfall of support. So they regard us as a middle income country. So from that source of internal community is also dwindling. The core issue is that a constitutional mandate ought to be adequately funded. Otherwise, it risks being carried out in a lesser way or even aborted. And that creates problems for Parliament.
Yeah. One of the things that became very clear in your presentation to the committee, I'm saying this because there's a shortfall and it's difficult to sort of close that gap. One of the things that came up is the vacancy rate within the institution. And given that only 52% of the budget needed to fill vacancies is available, what measures are being taken to manage the shortfall and ensure the institution remains functional and effective?
Again, it's about trade-offs. We may be sitting with a demand ratio of 151 million versus the allocation of 71 million. So we've got to prioritize that. So we've made a decision that priority will be resourcing committees in terms of researchers, content advisors, as well as requisite administrative staff for those committees. So at the engine rooms of Parliament functioning, which is the committees, is funded and it is adequately supported. So those are some of the trade-offs we have. We have also allocated money in terms of the core operational supports, the table staff, National Assembly, the offices of the Executive Authority, the Speaker, and also committees. We have allocated 443 million rand for the National Assembly. Likewise, in the NCOP, offices of the Chairperson, the table staff, as well as committees, we have allocated 217 million. That total to 689 million that we have allocated just for table. The rest is core business that then transcends both houses in terms of the total budget we have of 3.2 billion.
Okay, STP, I have to let you go. I know you need to be in the House briefly, but before you go, is there any allocation for the rebuilding of Parliament, and where are we with that project, and what can we expect in the debate today?
Both the National Assembly and the old Assembly, in terms of, they are now Project 1, Project 2. There's contractors appointed for each. They are on site, and I'm sure many of you would have experienced them. The inconvenience that is beginning to dust out the whole precinct. So there's work in place. We've given them 20 months to finish the work, and we envisage that by end of November 2026, those buildings must be completed, so at the opening of Parliament in 2027 in February, it's done in the new Parliament buildings. And that work is continuing in earnest.
Thank you very much, STP. That was the Secretary to Parliament, Mr. George, sharing key insights on Parliament's mandate in this new term and how it's managing tight budgets to support members in their oversight and lawmaking duties. Don't go away.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtwenitsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
The South African Constitution which gives certain powers to legislatures, Parliament in particular, to say there's a role of Parliament in terms of the budget process. Parliament a specific role to play in terms of oversight over public finances in South Africa, and the Constitution prescribes for Parliament to have specific legislation which guides how Parliament process the budget as presented by the Minister of Finance in February and in mid-term budget in October. So that legislation which was prescribed in terms of the Constitution is called Money Bills and Related Matters Act, which was passed in 2009 to say these are the processes which you follow as Parliament in oversight over public finances or in processing the budget as we know them. And that act does recognize that members of Parliament are not supposed, are not necessarily voted in as technical specialists in finance, economics, and policy spaces. And then as a result, they established the office called Parliamentary Budget Office as a unit which is supposed to advise Parliament on the process, on the money bills themselves, on the budget process. What are the issues they need to consider by doing analysis, research, and brief the committees in terms of what some of the matters that they need to take into account, or some of the issues just around society in relation to service delivery. So we are that office which is established as a direct technical and advisory to Parliament on finance and economic and policy spaces in relation to the budget process. So we certainly, in a way, what happens is that when the Minister of Finance presents the budget, the Finance and Appropriations Committee invite us to brief them about these budgets, what are the issues, what they need to take into account and so on, and together with other entities and before the public hearings. So that's we come in, we can know, we need to see this and this what it means and all of that, and then they take the process forward. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
You're still watching Parliament TV channel 408, coming to you live from Parliament as we build up to the debate on Parliament budget vote in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces at 2 p.m. Now remember to also tune into our social media platforms to follow these proceedings. Now before we wrap up the build-up program, we are joined by Dr. Jantjies, the head of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Of course, Dr. Jantjies, thank you so much for joining us today. Just briefly, what is PBO, what do you do, and why?
Thank you so much, and thank you to our viewers. Yes, PBO is the entity of Parliament, which was established really to advise Parliament on budget issues. Yes. When the budget is presented, Parliament gives it to us to advise them, particularly look at the impact of the budget on society, on the economy, and the public finances. But also we go do some distributional analysis to say, who really gets affected by the budget in a positive or negative way. But I think we see our role to enhance transparency and accountability in supporting Parliament, give them this information that they would never necessarily get it from the executive in particular. So in a nutshell.
And then looking specifically at this afternoon's budget vote, what role then does the Budget Office play within Parliament's budget?
I think what we do, we look at the budget as a whole. So Parliament's budget is part of the all the votes that are allocated by budget. So we looked at it as part of, we don't necessarily zoom into the Parliament's budget, but look at it as a whole with other budget votes in particular. So that's a very limited role, but more holistically, how does the allocation support Parliament in oversight role? So that's what we look at a high level, really.
And of course, we've had Budget 3.0, and this is the reason why we've had these delays, right? Now, given the current economic climate, what advice then has the PBO given to Parliament's finance and appropriation committees?
Sure. I think what has happened, what we've been doing over the years, we've always been saying the way Parliament looks at the budget has to be more about seeing the budget as a tool of transformation. To say the National Development Plan will say this amount of growth we want to achieve, this amount of employment we want to achieve, and this amount of state capability we want to achieve over the next few years or so. Now our role is to say, is the budget taking us to that perspective? How is budget taking us to realize growth, realize employment, and deal with inequality that happen? And when you see consistently, even this year, the mid-term development plan, what we often have done a lot, is particularly in this time, we've tried to look at the alignment. is the budget aligning to the key priorities set out in the development strategy? In particular, look at growth, cost of living, state capability, but so many other things. So we looked at in that way, and we've been very consistent over the years. How is alignment? Our concern has always been we need to have very much deliberate convergence between the planning and the budget on the other side. It has been very going divergent over time of the years, and our view is that Parliament has the authority to bring that to more convergence between the planning and the budget on one side, and our role is to provide that information. It is not aligned, it is aligned, or how much of it is aligned, and which are the priorities that we'll be able to realize with that budget framework, given the priorities that were set out in the midterm development plan or the State of Nation address. That's very crucial in our view for oversight role, to say when Parliament look at it, these are the priorities. Is the budget aligned? We come in there and say, no, it is, or yes, it is. How much of it is aligned? And will we realize employment that we set ourselves? No, we won't. Or will we realize reduce cost of living? Yes, but if you increase VAT, maybe that will not be the same as you want to be, or how does that contradict the priorities in particular?
And just lastly then, Doc, in terms of, on the back of the alignment of key priorities, of course, when it comes to the NDP targets, especially with regards to youth jobs and infrastructure and the progress thereof, how does then PBO ensure that some of these realistic factors that are on the ground are considered by Parliament, and Parliament uses that strategically when it comes to the budget?
Yes, good point. I think our mandate or role requires us to do that, really synthesize key social development issues and ensure that it reflects itself in our analysis and advice. So what we do in our budget advice, we say to Parliament, these are the current state of socio-economic development in society. This is where learning and outcomes are sitting. This is where the health outcomes are sitting. These are the safety and all of that. And that really is the reality based on what is happening in the ground. And we say to Parliament, is the spending on health allocated now, will it improve on these outcomes or the status, or it will not improve on that, or how much it will improve on that? So that helps us a lot in setting the, we call it social context of the budget. So we set social context of the budget at the beginning of the advice. So this is where we are. How is this? And having taken that from the ground, this is our experiences in terms of the status of economic and social development, and is this budget really going to make it better or worse? And Parliament has to decide, is this what we want?
Thank you so much for making the time.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
And that was Dr. Jantjies unpacking the vital role of the Budget Office, and also telling us how they're keeping Parliament on track with regards to what is going on the ground and ensuring that the budget works for you. And that's where we leave it today, but we'll stay tuned because we are about to watch the budget vote debate that kicks off at 2 p.m.
On Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025, the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Mtweni-Tsipane, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Angela Toko-Didiza, will present Parliament's budget vote in the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, respectively. Parliament's budget vote outlines the allocation of funds to support its key functions, including oversight of government departments and policies, the legislative process, public participation and engagement initiatives, as well as international relation and cooperation programs. It also includes a detailed report on the previous financial year's expenditures, illustrating how funds were allocated to promote transparency, accountability, and the efficient management of public resources. Watch the National Assembly debate on Budget Vote 2 and the NCOP plenary, including the debate on Budget Vote 2 across Parliament's platforms on Tuesday, the 15th of July 2025 at 2 p.m. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
And you're on Parliament TV, and we're about a minute away from the budget vote of Parliament. And of course, we've had conversations with the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Anneli Lotriet. We've had a conversation with the STP, that is the Secretary to Parliament, the accounting officer of this institution. And we've just had a conversation with the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Janchis, in preparation to the budget that is happening at 2 p.m. Shihla, what are some of the highlights from our conversations today?
I think the most important thing is to understand what the budget allocations mean, particularly for the core functions of Parliament. The issue of oversight always comes to the fore insofar as Parliament is concerned, because anything that happens in the executive, everyone is looking at Parliament. What's Parliament doing about this? And the STP said something very important, that the under-resourcing of Parliament creates a lot of problems in that it hampers public participation, where oversight visits end up being limited to a certain area. So you don't have the extensive consultation that is expected. And it's very important for citizens, everyone on the ground, to participate in the processes of Parliament. So that's one of the key issues. But we're looking ahead to hear how those allocations are going to look like.
And of course, he also mentioned that with the issue of under-resourcing, specifically the issue of public participation, that those are some of the issues that we get driven to court. Parliament is taken to court because of a lack of public participation. And you find that the process of bills having been enacted into law, it just goes back. So it's money that can be used. Money, we could have enough resources to ensure that processes are fulfilled. However, the under-resourcing sort of gets in the way, and it's counterproductive to what Parliament wants to achieve.
It's a catch-22 situation as well, because you can't look elsewhere for funding, because if you look for sponsors elsewhere, like you alluded to, then the people that sponsor you are going to expect you to push to at least act in their favor when bills that affect them need to be processed in Parliament. So it's a very difficult one for Parliament. And I don't know, maybe the national dialogue must also discuss how Parliament must be resourced, how allocations must be done, programs of Parliament must be funded, because there's a great expectation, rightfully so, on Parliament to act on most of these things that are taking place in society, particularly what's happening in government. Well, not just recently, you think of the State Capture Commission, those recommendations, and so on. And I think right now...
we're about over just a little bit, 2 minutes. And of course, we are building up to the debate on Parliament budget vote in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, to be presented by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mama Didiza, and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mama Refilwe Mtweni-Tsipane. And it is important that you tune in to our social media platforms and follow these proceedings, because just like the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Anneli Lotriet, mentioned, it is your money. And you might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And with that, of course, you're still watching Parliament TV, and also with the conversation that we had with Dr. Janchis. If you need to have more information on the budget, on the Parliamentary Budget Office, you can do so by visiting our website at www.parliament.gov.za. and direct yourself to the PBO. And of course, they do have briefings and research papers on which you can inform yourself and be an informed citizen. And of course, we've been talking about active citizenship. And of course, we've been waiting for the budget vote debate, and we are waiting for the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces to present the budget of Parliament.
And we believe very shortly both of them will be working in And we believe very shortly both of them will be working